Our initiative entitled Dialogue of Continents is not a new concept. We are dealing with major shifts in the global economy, but also in global governance. And maybe this is the time, maybe to re-engage not only countries, but academic and experts to think about the narrative.
Is that proximity matters. Trade volumes are most concentrated intra-regionally. So although we talk about global value chains, and again, economists and statisticians can help us with it, it's probably more accurate to talk about regional supply chain. Today's rules, which are largely tariff-based, border and beyond the border regulatory barrier-based, don't quite get at the more fundamental issues of state capitalism, of ways of doing business, of choice of regulating market. And thus what we need to do in getting beyond today's agenda is to figure out a common agenda to make the rules more responsive to the 21st century way of doing business.
Nowadays, dialogue, that is a term accepted in any kind of gathering, political, economic, financial, or whatsoever. And this is very important. Dialogue of continents, going far beyond just the concept of dialogue to be better than any clash.
We're also, I think, in a transition and an inflection point in terms of how we think of our own development. The first of my recommendations is bring back the connection between security and economic thinking. The challenge is going to be how multilateral institutions can employ the enormous amount of data that is out there and that is in part shrouded by commercial secrets, in part used by states in good or many times bad ways, to actually generate both an awareness of global problems and the kind of solutions that might be employed.
I believe that the issue of multilateralism and threats to it is a very central issue for a global community. What is ironic, in my view, is that the countries, the people of countries who design the system are the ones where the support for the current system is the weakest.
In a big way, because Europe has a lot to lose and a lot to gain from the multilateral system working or not working effectively over the next 15 years.
My understanding, we are in a transitory period. In a transitory period from the old composition of power to the new composition of power. Don't get me wrong, but it would be a complete illusion to think one could establish a functioning multilateral system without the integration and without an anchor role of the still first military power in the world, which are the United States of America.
The question is whether or to what extent labor will be replaced by, human labor will be replaced by artificial intelligence. And that reminds me on a quote made by Jack Ma, the chairman of Alibaba, in Davos this year at the occasion of the World Economic Forum, who said, "Don't let our children compete with artificial intelligence. We should educate them in ethics and humanity and the ability to cooperate."
The fear of the future is ever present in man's DNA, but it's the ability of man to engage with the future that continues him on the journey forward. Is that what we're talking about with AI is the great story of our time. Your children, your grandchildren, our great-grandchildren will study what's going on now in the way that our children are studying the Second World War or the Civil War.
So the idea that price level target is going to be just an enhanced form of forward guidance is incorrect. Once you reach zero, and not only you cannot, you don't want to go to 2, but you want to go above 2, either on a temporary basis or on a more permanent basis, the only way you're going to achieve that one is going to be by going into quantitative easing or credit easing or negative policy rates. Forward guidance by itself is not going to be sufficient. Talking about price level targeting is not forward guidance. It's actually to achieve that result, because that's your target. You have to go to instruments that are unconventional, like quantitative easing, credit easing, or negative policy rates.
People tend to believe at the time that a trade war was going to be words, not actions. When it started to become actions, we had a big effect on the price of commodities and a pressure on the FX market.
What drives the economic growth? Number one, export. And number two is a business investment. But export, when you look at export volume, it's flat. So it really comes from quality improvement, higher prices. So just by introducing nominal GDP target, I don't think it creates any difference on the Japanese economy unless it can accompany credible policies together.
In my opinion, if we want to have some sort of inclusive growth in the world, we must have a huge plan shared by Europe and China for Africa. If we don't be very careful on that, clearly we create a more exclusive world inside the country and outside and globally. And I think that the political consequence can be very serious.
We are all using the term inclusive growth, but what do we mean by that exactly? I know that the concept of fairness for economists is a taboo word. Maybe I hear differently from my colleague to the left, but fairness today is very important.
I think that maritime economy gives us a clear indication of the global economic rebalancing between Asia, European Union, and United States.
We think that fiat currency is the best currency, one of the best inventions since sliced bread in countries that are well governed. But rather than blockchain is a governance technology. And I think it is very promising because it is the first time that we're able to introduce governance where we don't have a government.
Bitcoin is not competing with other cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is actually competing with the current fiat system, the top ones, and gold itself. So it needs to be better than them in order to eventually win. Nothing except Bitcoin can claim to be decentralized. Everything else has leaders. It has probably companies. They issued ICOs. They are totally regulatable. Everything is enforceable. They are the monetary policy of their coin.